Hello there BookTube, how are you doing? Today I'm doing the Moody reader tag and I was very kindly tagged in this by Sandy over at Misreads a Lot. If you've watched videos on her channel, you might have seen how she chooses people for tags, and it's quite fun. It's kind of a random draw, and I always really enjoy that. But anyway, I'll get into the tag. It's been making its round for I think a few months now. Which has given me lots of time to think about it, and I was very glad to be tagged in it and to have my go at it. I probably would have done it anyway at some point, but here we go. This tag was originally created by Slanted Spines, and the first question is, do you consider yourself a mood reader? My initial question to this is no. I would describe myself as an intuitive reader. Normally if I don't know what to read, I will look at my shelves and just see what strikes me, what book jumps out at me, or what book on a list of books I want to get to seems most appealing. But I think when it comes to intuition, there is a certain amount of mood in there. I think it's just less obvious. And so maybe I am a kind of subconscious mood reader and I'm just not ready to admit it yet. Then the second prompt is, do you set TBR lists and do you stick to them? Yeah, I quite like that little end bit. And sort of is my answer to both parts of that. I kind of have rather loose TBR lists that I make at the beginning of every year. It's just a checklist that I put on I got like a cork board in my kitchen, and I pin my list to it. And I just check them off as I go. It's not every book I'm going to read through the year, because I want to have room for intuition and just for picking up something random. Yeah, and I don't always get every book ticked off with that. Although normally towards the end of the year I will get a bit more intense and will try to get as many of them done if there are a fair few waiting for me. Then the third prompt is, do books affect you emotionally? Does the mood of a book rub off on you? And I don't know, not always. I think books have been affecting me emotionally a little bit more recently. Yeah, I don't necessarily think of myself as someone who will get emotional with a book, yeah, definitely more recently. One time when a book really rubbed off on me though was this book, We've Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, and in this book she's doing a really good job of building a very tense but slow and creepy atmosphere. And so over the couple of days while I was reading this, I found myself getting really paranoid, which doesn't always happen when I'm reading, but I thought it was quite funny that this book affected me in that way. Then number 4 is, when you're feeling sad, what do you read, or do you not read when sad? And often I will just be reading whatever I'm reading at the time. Sometimes just reading in itself, it makes me feel productive, and it will lift my spirits a little bit. If I'm really sad, maybe I will be reading less, probably watching more TV and things like that. Yeah, if I'm really sad, then often something that will lift my spirits and get me feeling better is just going on a nice long walk, and that normally kind of resets me emotionally. Then number 5 is, most often, do you use reading to escape, learn, or to critically reflect? And a bit of all of those, I suppose, but I will probably add a few other things in there. When it comes to escapism, again, I don't really think of myself as someone who reads to escape, but I'm ready to admit that the act of reading is always a little bit of an escape, but it's not necessarily my biggest intention. I'm not reading to escape. There's just an element of it in there, if that makes sense. But I nearly always read to learn and to experience things that hopefully I haven't experienced and read before. And that's, I just love learning and finding out new things. And that's definitely one of the big things for me with reading. But then also there is a fair bit of reflection and of thinking critically, but that normally happens when I've put the book down. It's not necessarily happening as I'm reading, so there's a fair bit of that. But one of the things I wanted to add to this is that maybe one of the biggest things that I want to do when I'm reading is to empathise, to kind of have an emotional connection with the author somehow, or a kind of telekinetic link with them. And I think that's one of the things, one of my intentions in reading is to have that kind of connection of empathy. Then number 6 is, what is a book that made you laugh out loud? And the book that I think of for a book that made me laugh out loud is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. Now, it's been quite a few years since I've read this book, and for the life of me I can't actually remember at which instances I was laughing, but I am sure if I pick this up again to read, I will be laughing almost all the way through it. And then next up, number 7, we have, what is a book that made you cry, or if you don't cry, one that really moved you? And I can't think of a book that made me cry. I think there was a question like this in the mid-year freakout tag, and I answered 2 books for that. I've recently read The Diary of Anne Frank, and I was definitely getting close to crying as I was reading the epilogue to that book, and also while I was reading The Hare with Amber Eyes by Edmund de Waal. But I was thinking of a book that really moved me. Of that I'd probably say In Dubious Battle by John Steinbeck. The end of this book is just really brutal, and just the idea of this book, it's about fruit pickers in California and a strike that they put on, and just the way in which so many people or groups of people around these workers kind of dehumanise them or just see them as a means to an end, whether that's the business owners who just see them as a workforce, or whether that's the political group that are using their strike to meet their own ends and to try and get some kind of revolution or something like that happening. And yet no one seems to see these people as human beings, and I thought that was really, just really beautiful and moving. Well, not beautiful, it's horrible that they're not being seen, but the fact that Steinbeck was putting it that way I thought was beautiful and very moving. And then, what is a book that you didn't even know how you felt about? Yeah, I read that right, there we go. And I think I brought this up before. This is Kingdom Land by Rachel Allen. It's a fairly recent collection of poetry. I think it came out in 2019. And this poetry collection, I don't know, I just felt like for a fair bit of it, it was a bit up and down, and yeah, there were some poems where I just didn't really get why she was telling me what she was telling me. I kind of got what she was telling me, but I didn't get why. But then I got to a poem towards the end, I think it was called Banshee, and a few other poems around there, and suddenly I realised that there's a kind of loose narrative being strung together, and it's only at the end where she's pulling the cord and things are coming together. And it's not totally obvious, but I just got the impression that there were all these connections that I'd missed, So I'm not sure whether, maybe I'll enjoy it more the next time around because I'll pick up on more of these connections. But for the time being, I'm not totally sure. I think it might have more potential than I initially thought. And then number 9 is, are you more likely to read on a sunny day or a cloudy day? And I more or less read at any time, to be honest. The weather doesn't massively affect whether I'm going to read or not. I do tend to do more reading and writing too, actually, when it's dark, just because it seems like there are less distractions when it's dark for some reason. But yeah, the weather doesn't make a massive difference unless I'm reading outside. And then prompt 10, do you usually set the mood when you read with music, lights, smells, etc.? And again, not really. Sometimes I might, I need light to read. Sometimes I put music on in the background, but sometimes I find it a bit distracting. I don't know, sometimes maybe I've just done some cleaning and there's some air freshener in the air. But yeah, I don't intentionally set the mood before I read. I tend to just read whenever I feel like I can. And then 11, can you leap from book to book, or do you feel you need a buffer time between them? And I think I can really jump between book to book. I tend to read multiple books at once, and if I have a fair bit of time allotted to reading, I tend to read a bit of one book and then jump over straight to another book. And then if we're thinking of sort of completing a book and then moving on to other books, I tend to, when I've finished a book, I do kind of have a bit of a high maybe, and I'm ready to go on to something else, and it kind of spurs me on. So I tend to, as soon as I've finished a book, tend to try and choose what I'm going to read next and read the first few pages of that. As I said earlier, I think if I do read a little too much of something, if I'm reading too many books that are just really, really depressing, I will try and change things up a bit. But yeah, I'm pretty good at just jumping from book to book with whatever I find interesting. So I think that's everything. I'm going to be tagging Christina over at Knitting Books etc. and Greg over at Another Bibliophile Reads. It'd be great to see what you guys have to say about these prompts. But I'd open up to any of you watching. If you haven't done this yet, feel free to do it. And please feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. Maybe even if you've already done the tag, if maybe you've changed your mind about some of the prompts, feel free to let me know how you've changed your mind. But yeah, that's everything for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.